Okay, chapter 14, how to use the grid view control. So the grid view control is a real cool control. You can use it to bind fields to format and display the data. You can use it to update data in a data source. There's events tied to it that you can use to check for exceptions. Someone puts in some bad data or something. You can use the SQL data source to insert, that's associated with the grid view control, to actually insert rows back into the database. And then if I want to control the look and feel of the grid view, I can use the template fields. And then there's validation controls that I can use to validate data. So really powerful control out of the box grid view. That said, there are other third-party grid view controls that are even better. So this is the one that comes free with ASP.NET. But there's places like Component One and Telerik and other third-party vendors that sell amazing grid view controls. So, but let's talk about the ones out of the box. So basic functions, difference between a bound field and a template field. Talk about the command line, the command field, how it's used in grid control. The before action, after action events of a grid control. How you can add rows to a grid view control. So we'll talk about all that stuff. What is a grid view control? This is what it looks like out of the box without any special formatting. We've just connected to, it looks like the category table. So it's showing the IDs, the short name, the long name. But notice what's on the right-hand side. You've got options for editing, updating, deleting. And it looks like that third row is actually in edit mode. So you can see there's text boxes instead of labels that's displaying the data. So I can go in there, make a change, and then either click update or cancel. The great thing about a grid view control is it enables me to do what very quick database applications. I can draw, no code really. I can, in a very short amount of time, take an existing database, drop a grid view control on my page, configure it to connect to that database, and then right-click to the grid view control and say I want to be able to do create, update, delete. As long as it's connecting against a single table, and that single table has a primary key, it'll generate the insert, update, delete statements for me, and I'm good to go. So very rapid. Now, that said, not the... I wouldn't do this all the time for enterprise level applications. If I've got 10,000 users that all need to update a table, probably not going to hook up a grid view control and just run with it. There's a little more. There's probably a application present. Well, there's a layer, a data access layer that I need to develop for scalability. That would be that this skips. But for small department level or admin level type stuff, it's great. Alright, so this is what the grid view control looks like in the markup. You've got your ASP grid view. It's got an ID, they're on that server. Whether or not I want to generate columns, or auto-generate columns, or I want to specify. In this example, we're not auto-generating, we're actually specifying columns. I don't type all this though. This is, again, generate from a wizard. So let me show you. This is after we're into the grid view control. Now we're formatting the different fields. But let me go back out to Visual Studio. And let's open up exercise 14. And look at the grid view. So here we are, exercise 14. This is the page, and we haven't actually put anything on here yet. So let me turn to my book in chapter 14 and see what they want us to do. So this is exercise 1 in chapter 14. And I'm going to use this for demo purposes. But basically what they're having us do is adding the grid view control to the page. So I'll go over to my data group in my toolbox and drag a grid view control over to my page. And then, this is where all the magic happens, where I can quickly say, and let's see, they want me to connect up to, it looks like the customers. So let's go and create a new data source. And I'm going to go to a SQL database. I mentioned this in the last video, but there are other object relational mapping or data access layers I could choose. So there's entity framework and link. I could set, and we'll talk about some of these other ones later. But for now, we're sticking with SQL Server, which is actually not SQL Server specifically, but this is a data sets and data connections ADO.NET framework that we're using. So we're connecting to our local MDF Halloween database. Let it generate a connection string for us. Click Next. Now here's where I'm saying, okay, what columns do I want to display? What's my select statement going to look like? It looks like they have me grabbing first name, last name, state, and city from the customers table. So we'll switch to the customers table, and we'll say we want to see first name and last name, city, state, and city. So you can see my select statement being generated down here. And do they have me grabbing them all? I think so. So that's we won't do a where clause. Actually, let me go back for 1 second. I mentioned in the last video, this is where, and it's like I'm getting a little bit of a lag in my user interface, but once this thing comes back, that advanced button is where I could go in and set those options for optimistic concurrency and whether or not I want to generate the insert, update, and delete statements. So once this guy comes back, I'll click that button. If it comes back, it's thinking about it. Got a lot going on, so it's it's probably swapping out some memory. While it's thinking about it, I'll jump back to the slides for a second. These are some of the options that we have, so we can go in there, and once we start adding the different columns to our grid view, we can go to each column and we can say things like, what styles do I want, what data format is where I could set it up to be displayed as a currency or something like that. This is where this little option here is where I can say, you know what, this basic formatting is not doing it for me. I want to convert it to a template field. Then, just like we saw in the last video, it creates a template around the column where I can go and I can do pretty much anything. I can add drop-down list box. I can put in an image. Whatever I wanted to do to format that field. These are some of the properties that we use typically with some of the fields. So, whether it's read-only, whether, how I want to display a null, if there's any header text, whether I want to show the header or not. Common field elements, columns, bound field, button. So these are the different types of fields that I can have in my grid view. And then there's different styles that I can apply. So whether it's the alternating row, the style for each row, when I'm in edit mode, what do I want that to look like? And then this is some of the ASP.NET code that gets generated when I select some of these things. So in this example, we've got our grid view. We're connected to the category database. We've identified the primary key, which is important if we want to be able to do insert, update, and deletes. We've set use item style to set the width. We're setting read-only true to the category ID. Then down here we're setting some colors, and that's what it looks like. And by the way, this is with sorting enabled, so these columns are highlighted. The grid view knows how to automatically sort those. I can click on any of those columns and it will sort based on those columns. And that's just a wizard thing. I just say, yeah, I want to be able to sort. And that's when I right click on the wizard and say I want to be able to sort, it sets, allow sorting equal to true, and then there's some default sort expressions. You can change this. You can go in and change this to something else, but if I select the product ID, that would be the default column to sort on. For each bound field, you can specify, what the sort expression is. So it doesn't have to be a single column. You can see down here the category ID. We can say, some categories are going to be duplicated, so it's going to be more than just the category ID when we sort. It's category ID and then the name to take into account duplicate categories. So that's an example. This is an example with paging enabled. So a grid view. You can say, hey, right-click, I want to be able to do paging, and you can set how many records do you want in each page, what the paging will look like. So down here, I go to second page, third page. I think this is a 10 record. That's the default 10 record per page. So there's a property to say allow paging, whether or not you want that on, and then you can set the pager style, the back color, whether you want where you want to align the paging controls. So there's whether or not to allow paging, the page size. There's what you want. Do I want numbers? Do I want an arrow? So the first page text. You can actually set an image or have text. All sorts of different. All these properties are used to change the formatting of the pager settings. So in this example, they've said the mode is next, previous, first, and last, and then they actually specified text, and so that it looks like this. And now with the product list application with the grid view controls configured, it sort of looks like that. And then they go through some of the code that gets generated. Now they're going in and they're Chapter 14, adding an edit, update, and cancel button. So I come in here and say, hey, I want to I'm adding another column to my grid, but this grid is it's not the short name or last name. I'm adding functions, right? I'm adding an update, edit, delete column. I'm adding, or a cancel column, or adding a delete column. So when I do that, it allows me to then have that functionality. Be careful. See this auto-generate fields? If I click that, it will duplicate. So it'll go through and read the ID, short name, last name, and include them. And then I'll get, like, if I've already included them here and then I check it off here, I'll get them twice. So it's sort of an either or. You either specify them here or you delete them out of here and just check this off and you get sort of the. I generally don't use that because it's not, unless I'm just doing something quick and dirty. And even then, it's just simple enough to specify which ones I want. The command field. So this is properties of this. We just chose the edit, update, cancel command field. And these are some of the attributes that are available. So what the button will look like, whether or not this field causes validation to occur, if it belongs to a validation group. So this is some of the attributes that show buttons and set the text or images they display. So you can have a cancel button, a delete button, an edit button, what text or whether I want an image to be displayed. Some typical code that define these command fields. Yeah, I've got a button. I want to show the button. It doesn't cause validation. And there are certain events that get raised by the grid view control, and these are useful for doing things like adding messages. Like if someone's going to go delete a row, you might want to say, "Are you sure?" So when someone hits the delete button, the row deleted event will be fired, and so I can have a method. Just like when I click on a button, there's a button click method associated with the button click event. I can have row deleted, a method associated with the row deleted event, so that I can come up and say, hey, are you sure? And if not, I can cancel that process. So here's an example where we're saying we've got row updated. So we've created a method row updated that's tied to the row updated event, and we're saying, hey, as long as there's no issue, then go ahead and we'll put text as saying, or actually, if neither of these is true, then the update is fine. If there is an exception, so the exception, the event, there's an event argument that gets passed to this method, and one of the properties of the event's argument is whether or not there was an exception. If it's null, then we're fine. If it's not null, that's what this is saying, then some error has happened, and let's display the message that happened. That might be invalid column name or something like that. The other thing we're looking out for here is if we've done an update, but the affected row is another property of the events parameter. If that's 0, then our update did not happen, right? There should have been at least one row affected. And sometimes another thing I'll do is I'll put in here if affected rows is not equal to 1, because a lot of times my update is supposed to be one row, and if all of a sudden 10,000 rows are updated, then something has gone wrong. Please call your DBA to do a backup restore or something like that. But if it's equal to 0, that's another problem, right? Maybe your row went missing or something. So you've got SQL data source class. There's an insert method that you can call, and what you can do is you can actually use this to actually create new rows using the data grid back to SQL Server. Some of the other properties of the SQL data source class. There's an insert command which actually contains the insert statement. There's parameters that the insert command takes, so column values and things like that. There's a property called default value that can use. Is this take whatever the default value might be specified at the SQL Server level. So here's an example of SQL Server of code to insert a row. We might specify a parameter for each of the, in this case, the category ID, the short name, the long name. And it looks like what we're doing is we're taking the default value. So this assumes that there is a default value specified in SQL Server. We set those up to the default value, and we try to insert it. Then we clear them out from the text boxes that the user would have put in. And if something went wrong, we're using a try-catch block. And I don't recall if we've mentioned try-catch blocks before. I'll mention it real quick. What this does, I think we did, but this says, hey, this bit of code might fail. If it does, I don't want you to throw the default event handler, because that's kind of nasty. I want you to catch it and then handle it this way. So with that, this is an example of the category maintenance application that uses a grid view to provide insert, edits, updates, and deletes. And let me take that opportunity to go back to my configure data source and see if he's finished. Finally came back. He was thinking for a long time there. So where I don't have any insert, update, and deletes defined yet. Let me back up. I think something went wrong while it was waiting. There's my connection string. That's what are we supposed to do? Back. Just jump back to exercise 14.1, and I think we were looking at the customers. So we're grabbing those columns. I'm going to go to advanced, and it's not letting me check off. Okay, so this is an example where I want to generate insert, update, and delete statements because I'm going to go ahead and I want to complete create, read, update, and delete application here. And the reason it's not letting me check it off is because I think I don't have the primary key included. So what's my primary key on customers? Email, right? Remember from the database diagram last video? So now that I've checked that off, I can say, hey, I want to be able to generate insert, update, deletes, and I can also optionally choose to use optimistic concurrency. We'll say, okay, we'll leave that off for now. Say next, test my query. Looking good, let's finish that. Now so here's where all that stuff I just talked about. Do I want to be able to do paging? Do I want to be able to do sorting? Do I want to be able to allow editing, deleting? Do I want to be able people to click select the row? I might later do something with that. I don't need that right now. Well, I'll turn it on anyway. It doesn't matter. Do I want a slightly prettier table? So that we did this with the data list last time. Same kind of stuff here, right? So let's go professional, I guess. And now let's run this guy. So all I did is drag my grid view on there. I can set it up to a data source, did the whole connection string thing. Then I connected it to a table, as making sure I included the primary key. Now I've got a fully functional create, read, update, delete application. Andrew, I'm going to call him Andy. All right, let's see if this works. It can do, I can do update. The one thing I'm missing actually is the insert statement, right? And that's what I think we started to talk about how we could use the insert method to add that. But with no code so far, I've got edit, create, read, or I got read, update, and delete, and really I just need insert next. All right. Oh, let me show you what we got. The sorting's on, the paging's on, all that stuff with really no code that I had to type myself. And the next few slides go through some of the code. The next section talks about editing templates. So this is where, hey, I want to take a little more control over the display of this particular column. So what we want, just like we did with the data list control last chapter, we can come here and we say we want to edit a template of a control, and it's got the same kind of templates as last time as well. So in this example, what we were doing is we're saying, hey, we're showing the short name, and did we add some stuff to it or change the look and feel of it? Looks like, what we did here is we added a required field validator. So we edited a template so we could do some validation. And by adding a required field validator to the edit template, so we actually didn't change the item template, we changed the edit item template. So when someone's editing something, we're going to make sure that they have to put something in. Does that make sense? So now if someone goes into edit mode and they don't fill it in, the required field validator kicks in and says, please make sure you put something in before you hit update. And then just like with any other required validators, we can have validation groups. So we group those together, etc. All right. So that's chapter 14. If you get a chance, try out exercise 14.1. I will try to do a more complete video of walking through all of exercise 14.1, but I did a kind of a quick and dirty. Actually, I think I probably covered it all anyway. It's not a very complicated exercise. If you have questions, feel free to use the live meeting to shout out. Send me an email. If you're watching this video outside of our allotted time frame, feel free to shoot me an email, asynchronously, and I'll get back to you, throughout the week. Thanks, guys.